And the man accused of killing his wife and dumping her body in the Big Black River appears before a judge today.
Not guilty to 5 charges he's accused of, including murder, arson, and sexual battery of a minor.
Prosecutors told jurors throughout the trial that the murder was cold and calculated. Just a short time ago, Hinds County Judge Faye Peterson announced that Michael Owens would serve a life sentence for this brutal crime.
The wife vanished, a car burned, and a husband's chilling confession left a Mississippi community frozen in disbelief and fear. This isn't just another murder story. Ebony Owens' disappearance, Michael Owens' shifting lies, and that final guilty verdict shook Hinds County in a way people will never forget.
His wife, Ebony Owens, died from at least 1 gunshot wound back in March. Her vehicle was also found burned on Old Highway 80.
And here's where it gets even stranger. Because before all the police sirens and courtroom drama, there was Ebony. Ebony Owens wasn't just a name in headlines. She was 36 years old, a mother of 4 kids who saw her as the center of their world. Friends described her as someone who carried warmth in every room she entered, a woman who could balance a household full of kids and still have time to laugh with neighbors.
I just got here and the police was everywhere, and I'm like, what's going on? They said her car was found on the side of the road, burnt up. I'm like, man.
She had that kind of presence, steady, reliable, caring. But behind closed doors, things were not as picture perfect as the outside world believed. Welcome to Viral Crimes. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. Ebony was married to Michael Owens, a man just 2 years older, living in Edwards, Mississippi. Their relationship was complicated, at times loving, at times boiling with arguments that never seemed to truly end. You know what's crazy? People close to them would sometimes whisper about fights, jealousy, and accusations of infidelity. One moment, they'd be seen as a regular couple at church or in the neighborhood, and the next, Michael's temper would flare, leaving Ebony's friends quietly worried. A marriage with 4 kids in the middle isn't easy, let's be real. The bills, the responsibilities, the constant pressure. But add in tension, trust issues, and accusations of cheating. That's a ticking time bomb. Michael seemed to be a man wrestling with his own demons, whether it was control, insecurity, or anger, no one fully knew. But the cracks were there. According to me, that's what makes this story sting even more. It wasn't a random act of violence. This was a family unraveling from the inside. A mother trying to hold things together, 4 kids caught in the crossfire, and a husband who, as we later see, let rage destroy everything. So when Ebony disappeared in March 2023, those who really knew the couple weren't entirely shocked that something had gone horribly wrong. What they didn't know yet was just how dark the truth would get.
Owens was accused of killing his wife, Ebony, back in 2023. 12 News' Mercy Raines is outside the courthouse with the outcome.
This part blew my mind because the story starts like a mystery novel. On March 15, 2023, Ebony Owens was officially reported missing. Imagine that moment. A mother of 4 vanishes. No texts, no calls, no signs of where she could be. Her family panicked instantly because Ebony wasn't the kind of person to just disappear. The last known trace of her pointed toward Hinds County, Mississippi. Deputies scrambled, relatives called endlessly, and neighbors started to whisper. Where was Ebony? The first police response was quick, but there was this haunting silence. Hours turned into a full day, then another. Her children were left asking questions no one could answer. And here's the detail that set alarms ringing within days. Investigators found Ebony's car. But it wasn't parked neatly in a driveway or left abandoned on a roadside. No, it was burned. Completely torched. The Acura TXL she drove was discovered on Old Highway 80 near Jones Road, and right beside it, a gas can. The kind of clue that screams, this wasn't an accident. Her family's reaction. Absolute devastation. They knew at that point something terrible had happened. Police began piecing together a timeline, searching for any leads. Every moment mattered because now it wasn't just a missing person case, it had shifted into something far darker. Looking back, that discovery, the burned car, the gas can, was like the first puzzle piece in a nightmare that was only just beginning to unfold. But wait, it's about to get way more shocking. Because just when police were still treating this like a missing person case, they stumbled on something that ripped away any hope this was a simple disappearance. Ebony's car, her white Acura TXL, wasn't parked somewhere safe. It was found abandoned and burned out, sitting on Old Highway 80 near Jones Road. Picture that scene. Twisted metal, blackened paint, and the smell of gasoline still clinging to the air. Investigators noticed something right away: a gas can, casually left behind, almost like whoever torched a car didn't even care to hide the evidence. And as if that wasn't enough, the license plate wasn't even on the car anymore. It was found tossed into the woods nearby, like someone was trying to cover their tracks, but couldn't even finish the job properly. For detectives, this was no longer about maybe she ran off or maybe she just needed space. This was foul play, plain and simple. Cars don't torch themselves, and mothers of four don't just vanish without a trace. The family, of course, was spiraling. They'd been clinging to the thin thread of hope that Ebony might just walk back through the door. But when they heard about the burned Acura, hope turned into dread. This was the first undeniable sign that something had gone horribly, deliberately wrong. And here's the moment that broke everyone's hearts.
Sheriff Tyree Jones says they spent 5 consecutive days searching the Big Black River before they found Ebony Owens' remains.
10 long days after Ebony Owens was first reported missing, the search finally led to the Big Black River. Officers, divers, and volunteers scoured every inch of Hinds County. The tension was unbearable because with every hour that passed, the chance of finding Ebony alive slipped further away. On March 25, 2023, the search ended in tragedy. Her body was pulled from the river, a discovery that confirmed everyone's worst fears. 10 days of prayers, 10 days of hoping for a miracle, all shattered in an instant. Think about the weight of that moment. 4 kids, waiting for news about their mom, only to learn she was gone forever. A family left in tears on the riverbank. The community, already shaken by the burned car, now faced the reality that Ebony's life had been violently cut short. I must say, this was the turning point. Because up until then, there was still the slim chance she could be missing on her own terms. But a body in the river. That doesn't happen by accident. That's deliberate. That's cold. The public reaction was immediate and raw. Vigils were held, neighbors lit candles, and the story spread across Mississippi news like wildfire. People couldn't believe it. This wasn't some random crime in a city alley. This was a wife and a mother from their own community, and her body was dumped in the Big Black River like she was disposable. From that day on, the hunt for answers wasn't just about justice, it was about making sure Ebony Owens' name wouldn't fade into another statistic. And here are reactions even stranger: the evidence trail that tied the whole story together.
Says CEO Jasmine Chapman. She says when Owen did not appear for work Wednesday morning, it seemed unusual.
After Ebony's body was found, investigators doubled down. They weren't dealing with just a missing person anymore. This was now a full-on homicide case. And the clues were everywhere if you knew where to look. First stop: a bridge not far from where Ebony's car was torched. There, detectives discovered blood. Not just any blood, DNA tests confirmed it belonged to Ebony. Imagine that visual. Droplets of blood on cold concrete, a silent but screaming mother. It was like the crime itself had left fingerprints. Nearby, shell casings were also recovered. That was the next puzzle piece. Bullets don't fall out of thin air, and casings don't lie. They were proof that a gun had been fired, and it wasn't just a warning shot. When officers searched the Owens home, the findings were downright chilling. Rifles and magazines tucked away. A bloody blanket. Clothes stained with what would later test positive for blood. Every corner they turned in that house pointed to violence. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong or a random act by a stranger. No, everything was leading right back to Michael Owens. And the more investigators pieced together, the clearer it became. Ebony never stood a chance. You know what hit hardest? The contrast. On one side, you've got 4 kids, probably still asking when their mom is coming home. On the other side, you've got crime scene photos of blood-soaked fabric and burned-out metal. That's the story of a family split wide open by violence. The evidence didn't just connect Michael to the crime, it trapped him in it. Each discovery was like a nail sealing the coffin of his defense. But wait, it's about to get way more twisted. When police finally closed in on Michael Owens, the arrest wasn't just about putting cuffs on a suspect, it was about untangling the web of lies he'd been spinning. At first, Michael denied everything. He pleaded not guilty, trying to keep his story clean. But then, cracks started to show. One version he told. He walked in and found Ebony in bed with another man, both naked. Another version. Ebony reached for a gun first during an argument, and he acted in self-defense. Then came the infamous line. "She made me snap." These shifting stories weren't just inconsistent, they were damning. Detectives have a way of spotting when someone's panicking under pressure, and Michael's words screamed desperation. First, it was a shock. Then it was defense. Then it was regret. Which one was true? Maybe none. And here's the kicker. He admitted, in parts, to what happened. Shooting Ebony. Dumping her body in the river. Burning her car. Each confession was layered with excuses, but the pattern was clear. He wasn't innocent, he was cornered. Police saw through it. Every time Michael tried to wriggle out of the truth, the evidence shoved him right back into it. And eventually, the cuffed confession was undeniable. And just when people thought the worst was over, the courtroom turned the tragedy into a public reckoning. By September 2025, the trial of Michael Owens was underway in Hinds County. Prosecution versus defense, truth versus cover-up. The prosecution wasted no time setting the tone. They rolled out the evidence like a grim parade. Ebony's DNA on the bridge, the shell casings, the rifles, the bloody clothes, and the torched Acura. Every piece stacked higher and higher against Michael. And the timeline. Brutal. They painted the picture step by step, from the moment Ebony vanished, to the burned car, to the body in the river. It wasn't just about facts. It was about giving Ebony a voice when she no longer had one. Michael's defense team tried to counter, framing it as a crime of passion. They leaned on the rocky marriage angle, whispered about infidelity, and kept repeating that tired word. Self-defense. But in the eyes of the jury, those arguments were already fighting uphill. Court hearings stretched out, day after day, with witnesses testifying and Michael himself eventually taking the stand. The atmosphere was heavy. Every seat in the gallery was filled with eyes waiting for justice. And this was only the beginning. When Michael Owens finally took the stand, the courtroom air grew heavier. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the killer speaking for himself. From the start, his testimony was littered with contradictions. His first claim. He walked in on Ebony with another man. Not just together, naked in bed. He painted the scene like a betrayal so crushing that he simply lost control. According to him, the discovery shattered him in seconds. But then came another twist. In a different telling, he insisted Ebony reached for a gun first. He portrayed himself not as a husband on the brink, but as a man forced to defend his own life. Except, prosecutors quickly pointed out, no gun belonging to Ebony was ever recovered at the scene. And then came the emotional gut punch, the quotes that would haunt the trial. He admitted outright. She made me snap. I was so mad, I just shot her. There it was, stripped bare of excuses. A confession not wrapped in legal jargon or crafted defenses, just raw rage. The contradictions kept piling up. At one point, Michael described the shooting as an accident, claiming he didn't mean for it to happen. But in another moment, he admitted he shot her multiple times before dumping her body in the Big Black River. The jury heard it all. And with every inconsistency, his credibility crumbled further. Was it jealousy? Was it fear? Was it rage? Michael seemed to be rewriting his story on the fly, but every version ended with the same horrifying truth. Ebony was dead because of him. What struck observers the hardest wasn't just the violence of the act, but the cold clarity of his words. He didn't describe shock or grief. He described anger. He described being mad. And that, more than anything, exposed the heart of the case. By the end of his testimony, Michael hadn't painted himself as a grieving husband or a victim of circumstance. He had painted himself as a man who let his temper turn lethal. Michael's defense team had one mission. Save him from life without parole. And their strategy hinged on softening the murder into something less deliberate, less cold-blooded. They leaned hard into the self-defense narrative. According to their framing, Ebony wasn't an innocent victim, she was allegedly reaching for a gun when Michael fired. That single claim was meant to create doubt in the jury's mind. But when the evidence didn't back that up, the defense pivoted toward a crime of passion angle. They argued that this wasn't premeditated murder, but a tragic explosion from a man at the breaking point. The phrase rocky marriage came up more than once. They pointed to Michael's testimony about infidelity, betrayal, and heated arguments spiraling out of control. The defense tried to make Michael human again. Not a cold killer, but a husband whose emotions boiled over in one unbearable moment. They described him as snapping a man who acted in rage, not in calculation. The underlying hope was clear. Convince the jury to consider manslaughter, not first-degree murder. It was an emotional framing, tugging on the concept of broken love, marital strain, and the fragility of human control. But against the physical evidence, blood, bullets, a burned car, the argument seemed thin. On the other side, the prosecution never wavered. Their case wasn't built on emotion, it was built on evidence. They reminded the jury of every cold physical detail. Ebony's blood on the bridge. The shell casings. The rifles. The burned out Acura with a gas cube. Each piece wasn't speculation, it was proof. Then they turned to Michael's own words. The contradictions, the lies, the repeated attempts to shift blame. "She made me snap." That quote became their hammer, pounding home the idea that this was about selfish rage, not self-defense. The prosecution's framing was simple but powerful. Michael Owens killed Ebony not because he was in danger, but because he couldn't control his temper. He didn't stop after one shot. He didn't call for help. He dumped her body in a river and tried to erase the evidence by fire. Those actions weren't panic, they were cover-up. Most of all, the prosecution kept the jury tied to Ebony herself. A young mother of 4, silenced forever. They told the jury, this trial isn't about saving Michael Owens. It's about justice for Ebony. In that courtroom, they weren't just convicting a man, they were restoring a voice to the woman he tried to erase. Now, here's something you don't always see in a courtroom: a judge breaking that wall of stoicism. Judges are trained to be neutral, to measure every word carefully, and to keep emotion hidden behind the black robe. But when Judge Faye Peterson looked across the courtroom at Michael Owens, that mask slipped, just for a moment. And it made the entire room lean in. She called the case troubling. Just one word, but in the hands of a seasoned judge, it spoke volumes. This wasn't the usual legal jargon, the kind of detached commentary people expect. It was raw honesty. Peterson was saying that what she'd heard over the course of the trial had unsettled even her, a woman who has seen the darkest sides of humanity pass through her courtroom. And then came the word that pierced through the silence like a blade. Selfish. Not tragic. Not unfortunate. Not complicated. Selfish. She said it directly to Michael, stripping away every excuse, every shifting story he tried to hide behind. His act wasn't some uncontrollable accident or a moment of temporary insanity. It was a decision rooted in ego, jealousy, and rage. What her words did was reframe everything. Because at the end of the day, Ebony wasn't just the victim in a legal proceeding. She was a mother of 4. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a woman who had a life outside of the crime that ended it. And in one night, Michael erased all of that. For a judge to step outside the usual careful phrasing and call out the selfishness head-on, that told the jury, the families, and the public just how deep the wound went. Peterson's remarks weren't about punishment alone. They were about perspective. They reminded everyone that this trial wasn't simply about law and order, it was about a life stolen, children left motherless, and a family forever broken. When the person tasked with impartiality feels compelled to call out selfishness, you know the weight of the crime has left a scar that even the law cannot heal. September 8, 2025. This was the day everything came crashing down. After weeks of testimony, conflicting stories, and piles of evidence, the jury finally filed back into the courtroom. Every eye in Hinds County seemed glued to those 12 people, waiting for the words that would define the rest of Michael Owens' life.
To the testimony in this case, the one word that kept going through my mind was selfish. That everything that happened was because of our selfish needs, selfish desire, and quite frankly, very childish.
And when the foreperson spoke, there was no hesitation, no wiggle room, and no loophole to hide behind. Guilty of first-degree murder. Guilty of third-degree arson. The weight of that verdict hit like a thunderclap. Michael Owens had no room left to deny responsibility for ending Ebony's life and trying to burn away the evidence of it. Then came sentencing. Judge Faye Peterson, already visibly shaken by the selfishness she saw in this case, delivered the punishment with finality. Life in prison for the murder. 3 years for arson. Concurrent sentences. No chance of walking free, no countdown to release, just the rest of his life inside a cell. But here's the thing, sentencing hearings aren't just about numbers or years. They're about atmosphere, about human reaction. Inside that courtroom, you could feel the air itself grow heavier. On one side sat Ebony's family, clutching each other tight, their tears telling a story words never could. Relief, heartbreak, exhaustion, it all mixed in quiet sobs and whispered prayers. Justice had spoken, but justice could never bring her back. Across the aisle, Michael Owens sat stone-faced. No dramatic outburst, no begging for mercy. Just a man realizing that every shifting story, every excuse, every snap moment had led him here, to life behind bars. The jury, too, carried the weight. They weren't celebrating. There was no joy in condemning a man to life in prison. But there was resolve. They had seen the evidence, heard his contradictions, and decided that Ebony deserved justice more than Michael deserved freedom. For the community, this was closure, not victory. And sometimes, closure is the only thing left to grab hold of when a life has already been stolen. When the courtroom lights dimmed and the cameras turned off, the true aftermath began. Ebony Owens was gone, and no verdict could change that. Her family, especially her 4 children, was left navigating a life that would never feel whole again. Imagine being those kids, growing up without their mother, knowing she was taken not by some accident, not by illness, but by the man they called dad. That scar doesn't fade. It becomes part of their story forever. In Jackson, Mississippi, the case hit hard. Neighbors, church members, and friends, they all spoke of Ebony as a woman full of light, laughter, and resilience. She wasn't just another headline. She was someone who mattered deeply. The community turned this tragedy into a mirror, reflecting on broader themes: domestic violence, jealousy, and uncontrolled rage. People asked themselves tough questions. How many warning signs get ignored? How many arguments spiral into violence? How often do we excuse anger until it's too late? Ebony's story became more than a trial, it became a cautionary tale. A reminder that unchecked tempers can destroy families, that silence around abuse is dangerous, and that justice, while necessary, can never undo loss. For the Owens family, grief will linger. But alongside grief is the hope that telling Ebony's story might prevent another family from facing the same nightmare. Maybe someone will hear this case and decide to step back, to seek help, to stop before anger becomes irreversible. Because in the end, Michael Owens lost control for seconds. And those seconds rewrote dozens of lives forever. Justice may have been served, but nothing fills the void Michael created. Ebony was more than a victim, she was a mother, a light. Her children now carry her legacy, a haunting reminder of how one selfish act and unchecked rage can destroy everything. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.